My ex-husband walked into court holding his new wife's hand like he was arriving at a wedding instead of a legal hearing. He looked straight at me, leaned close enough for only me to hear, and whispered, "You're losing the house today." Then he smiled, and I nodded. Not because I was scared, because my lawyer hadn't even stood up yet. Before I tell you what happened in that courtroom, do one thing for me in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories about betrayal, divorce revenge, courtroom payback, and arrogant people getting exactly what they deserve, subscribe now. Because this one, it starts ugly and ends expensive. My name is Naomi Carter, and for 12 years, I built a life with a man who kept mistaking my patience for weakness. His name was Daniel Carter. 5 years before the divorce, people looked at us and saw the kind of marriage they thought was solid. Nice house, good neighborhood, decent schools nearby, vacation photos, dinner parties twice a year, matching coffee mugs, little jokes in the kitchen, the kind of marriage that looked calm from the outside. That is the dangerous thing about appearances. A house can look beautiful from the street, while the pipes are bursting behind the walls. Daniel was charming in the way some men are charming when they care deeply about being admired. Tall, smooth voice, always well dressed, always saying the right thing in front of the right people. He remembered names, sent thank you messages, smiled like a man who believed every room was waiting to be won. And for a long time, I helped him win it. I handled the things that made his life look effortless. School forms, medical appointments, holiday planning, meals, bills, repairs, family birthdays, tax files. I knew where everything was. I remembered every detail. I kept the machine running while he got credit for driving it. That's not bitterness. It's just the truth. A lot of women understand that truth without needing it explained. One day you realize you have spent years being the invisible support beam in your own home. And nobody notices the beam until they imagine removing it. The first sign that my marriage was dying did not come with lipstick on a collar or a guilty confession. It came with contempt. That small edge in his voice when I asked simple questions. That look when I disagreed with him in front of other people. That sigh men give when they want you to feel like your existence is administrative. Daniel started treating me like an old appliance. Still useful, no longer impressive. At first, I told myself he was stressed. His real estate business was growing. Deals, investors, calls, at all hours. He said he was doing it for us, for our future, for security. Funny word, security. It often enters a marriage right before trust leaves it. Then came the late nights, then the dinners that ran long, then the phone turned face down on the table, then the gym membership he suddenly cared about after 10 years of pretending treadmills were a government plot, then the new cologne. Then the way he started dressing for work, like there might be cameras following him, and finally, the thing that ended all denial for me, he became nicer, strategically nicer. That careful politeness guilty people wear when they are preparing to become someone else's problem. One Thursday evening, he came home with flowers. Wrong move. Daniel did not bring flowers unless a holiday forced them at gunpoint. I was in the kitchen slicing bell peppers for dinner when he walked in holding a bouquet like an actor in a commercial. "For you," he said. I looked at the flowers, then at him. "What did you do?" He laughed too fast. can't a husband be thoughtful? He set them down, still smiling. You always do that. Do what? Turn everything into suspicion. Interesting, because suspicion had not entered the room until he said it. I went back to slicing peppers. I asked a question. He came behind me, kissed my cheek, reached for a glass. I closed a deal. I'm in a good mood. Congratulations. Thank you. That should have been the end of it. Then his phone buzzed on the counter. He grabbed it too quickly. Not a glance. A snatch. That told me more than any message ever could. He must have felt me notice, because he gave me that patient little smile men use when they want to make you look unreasonable before you even speak. Client stuff, he said. I nodded. And something in me went quiet. That quiet matters. People think the end of a marriage sounds like screaming. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it begins in silence, in observation, in the part of you that stops arguing and starts collecting. Over the next few weeks, I collected a lot. Receipts from restaurants he claimed he never visited. A hotel charge 30 minutes from his office on a day he said he was buried in contracts. A second phone charger in his car. A silk scarf under the passenger seat that did not belong to me. And then the masterpiece. One Sunday morning, while Daniel was in the shower, his laptop lit up in the home office with a message preview. I wasn't snooping. I was carrying clean towels past the room. But when a screen lights up and the message says, "Last night was worth every lie. You do not need a search warrant to know your marriage is in hospice. My body did not do anything dramatic." No shaking. I just stood there holding folded towels and staring at the words that had ended 12 years in one glowing line. Her name was Betrayal. Of course it was. I put the towels down, walked back to the kitchen, poured coffee, and sat at the table until he came downstairs, dressed and smiling and pretending to be a husband. He kissed the top of my head as he passed. Morning. I looked up at him. Who is Betrayal? That was the moment, that split second where a guilty person decides which version of himself is about to answer the question. He recovered quickly, too quickly. Who? I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because lies are insulting when they're lazy. I held his gaze. Would you like to try again? His face changed. Not into shame, into annoyance. That told me everything. A man caught by surprise should look afraid. A man who looks irritated was not planning to confess. He was planning to manage me. He pulled out a chair and sat down slowly, like we were about to discuss home insurance. You went through my computer? No, I said. Your lie came to me. That landed harder than I expected. He looked away for half a second, then back. It's not what you think. There it was, one of the oldest lines in human failure. I folded my hands. Then help me. What do I think? He exhaled, long and tired, as if I were the difficult one for making him say aloud what he had done in secret. Her name is Betrayal, he said finally. It started a few months ago. A few months. I remember that detail because men cheat on you and still expect credit for not cheating longer. I nodded once. Are you in love with her? That startled him. Maybe he expected screaming. Maybe tears. Maybe plates against walls. What he got was paperwork energy. And men like Daniel fear paperwork energy because it means the woman in front of them is already halfway out emotionally. He rubbed his jaw. I don't know what love means anymore, Naomi. What a disgusting sentence. Not because it was poetic, because it was cowardly. Only a coward uses confusion as a moral shelter. I stood up. He looked relieved for 1 second, maybe thinking the moment was ending. It wasn't. I walked into the Home Office, came back with his laptop, placed it in front of him, and said, "Then you can figure it out somewhere else." He stared at me. "You're kicking me out?" "Yes, this is my house too." "Yes," I said, "for now." That changed his face. Because Daniel knew me. He knew I was not loud, not reckless, not messy. So when I said for now, he heard exactly what I wanted him to hear. Not emotion, process. He leaned back and gave me a tight little smile. "You think you're going to take the house?" "I think you should go pack a bag before I stop being polite." That was the beginning. The divorce was not final for another 11 months. And those 11 months taught me something important. A cheating husband is often irritating. A cheating husband with ego, money, and a new woman trying to impress him, dangerous. Because once Daniel moved out, he stopped pretending to feel bad. At first, he did the public version of regret, told mutual friends we were going through a difficult transition, told his mother I had become cold and impossible to communicate with, told the neighbours he was staying closer to work for a while. Meanwhile, he moved Betrayal into a downtown condo and started posting little pieces of their happiness online, like he was curating a museum exhibit called Freedom After Marriage, her hand holding a wine glass, her heels by a balcony door, a blurry dinner photo, a beach weekend, 2 coffee cups, and some smug caption about new beginnings. I did not react publicly. That bothered him more than if I had. Because men like Daniel need proof that the person they hurt is still orbiting them emotionally. They want rage, tears, posts, long texts. They want the dignity of being missed. I gave him nothing. Instead, I hired a lawyer. Her name was Evelyn Price. Late 40s. Sharp bob haircut. Stillness like a loaded weapon. She was not dramatic, not warm, and not interested in how people felt unless feelings had somehow become admissible evidence. I loved her immediately. Our first meeting lasted 90 minutes. I brought a notebook, a folder, screenshots, mortgage records, account statements, property tax files, renovation receipts, and a legal pad with dates written in black ink. Evelyn looked at the stack and said, "Good. You're not one of the women who come in here hoping pain counts as documentation." That may sound harsh. It sounded beautiful to me. I sat straighter. I want the truth to count. "It can," she said. "If you can prove where the money went, who paid what, and what he's hiding." That last sentence stayed with me. What he's hiding. Because by then, I already suspected Daniel was not just cheating. He was planning. Men like him do not leave marriages casually. They leave with stories prepared, numbers moved, and confidence borrowed from someone new who has not yet seen them lose. So I started looking harder, carefully. I pulled 12 years of bank statements, reviewed mortgage payment histories, checked renovation invoices from when we remodeled the kitchen, added the patio doors, and repaired the roof after the storm 3 winters ago. I found something interesting almost immediately. The house down payment had come mostly from one account, my account. More exactly, the account my late aunt left me before the marriage. I had kept it separate, then transferred a large portion for the purchase because Daniel promised we were building together. I remember that promise. He said it in the driveway the day we got the keys. Wrapped his arms around me, looked at the house like he'd built America, and whispered, "This is ours because of you." It is amazing how romantic sentences become evidence later. Then there were the mortgage payments. Yes, Daniel contributed, but not the way he liked to say he did. For years, his income ran through business accounts with convenient gaps. There were months he covered more, followed by months I quietly paid utilities, insurance, groceries, repairs, and sometimes half the mortgage from my salary because one of his deals was waiting to close. I taught high school English for 16 years. Steady money, predictable money, honest money, not flashy. But banks love teachers more than they love charming men with fluctuating commissions and expensive watches. Piece by piece, a pattern emerged. The house was not just a marital asset. It was a house stabilized by my inheritance, my credit history, my steady income, my documented payments, and my labour, financial and otherwise. Evelyn saw it too. At our fourth meeting, she tapped a page in the file and said, "He thinks possession and swagger are legal arguments." I smiled. That sounds like him. He's going to walk into court arrogant. How do you know? She finally looked up. Because weak cases often arrive dressed as confidence. That line stayed with me. By the time the hearing date came, Daniel had become openly smug. The calls from his side got more aggressive. The settlement offers became insulting. He wanted a forced sale or full transfer under the excuse that he was better positioned to maintain the property. Better positioned. That actually made me laugh the first time Evelyn read it. This man once called me from the driveway because he didn't know where we kept the spare batteries, but arrogance makes people stupid. Especially when a new audience is watching. And Betrayal was definitely watching. I saw her exactly once before the hearing, at a grocery store. I was near produce, comparing avocados, when I heard a voice behind me say, "Oh, wow." I turned. There she was, Betrayal, tall, blonde, expensive highlights, gym body, cream-coloured coat with the belt hanging loose like she expected wind machines to follow her. She looked younger than me by maybe 8 years, and the expression on her face was not guilt, it was curiosity. That offended me more, like I was some historical woman from the first chapter of a story she thought she had won. She smiled politely. "Naomi, right?" Interesting. She said my name like she had every right to it. Yes, she shifted her basket. "I've heard a lot about you." I said nothing. That bothered her a little. Good. She kept smiling. "This is awkward." "No," I said. "Awkward would be if I met you in my kitchen." That took the smile off her face, just for a second. Then it came back thinner. "I didn't break your marriage." That line was so shameless it almost deserved applause. I looked at her avocado-free basket, her polished nails, the little smugness in her chin. "No," I said. "You auditioned for the vacancy." I left my cart right there and walked away. When I told Evelyn about that meeting, she actually smiled, a real one. "Good," she said. "Good? Yes, let them underestimate your nerve." The night before court, Daniel called me. Not to apologise, to posture. I almost didn't answer, but Curiosity 1. What? I said. He chuckled softly, like we were co-parents discussing soccer practice instead of enemies with paperwork. You nervous? No, you should be. I leaned back against the kitchen counter. Why? Because tomorrow gets real. There was something oily in the way he said it. The confidence of a man who thought he knew the ending before the judge had even seen the middle. I looked around the house as he spoke. The framed photo near the hallway I still had not taken down. The lamp I bought with my second paycheck after a summer tutoring program. The crown moulding I painted myself because he didn't trust contractors. Every inch of that house held my fingerprints, whether legally visible or not. Daniel, I said, if you're calling to scare me, do it better. He laughed again. Then he said, you were always too emotional to understand business. I smiled. Because when a man says that to a woman who has quietly built a file thick enough to bury him, he is already halfway to losing. We ended the call 30 seconds later. I slept fine. That's the part people never believe. They expect I was up all night crying. No. By then, grief had already done its work. Court was not heartbreak. Court was inventory. The next morning, I wore a navy dress, low heels, pearl earrings, and the calmest face I could manage. I tied my hair back neatly, carried one structured leather tote, and walked into that courthouse like I was entering weather I had already checked. Evelyn met me at security. She took one look at me and nodded. Good. You look like a woman who reads before signing. Thank you. It's a compliment. We went upstairs together. Outside courtroom 4B, people sat on wooden benches, holding folders, coffees, and collapsed marriages. Some looked furious, some terrified, some exhausted, some numb. Divorce has a smell in courthouses. Paper, perfume, stale coffee, and broken plans. Daniel arrived 7 minutes later with Betrayal. Of course he did. He wore a charcoal suit, blue tie, polished shoes, and the expression of a man attending his own coronation. Betrayal was in a fitted ivory blouse and pencil skirt, holding his hand as if she had been invited to witness history. A woman beside me on the bench glanced at them, then at me, and gave the tiniest, sympathetic wince. I appreciated that more than words. Daniel walked straight toward me. Not Evelyn, me. Because men like him always want the emotional victory before the legal one. He stopped in front of me, leaned down, and whispered, "You're losing the house today." Then he smiled, and I nodded. Because my lawyer hadn't even stood up yet, he mistook that nod for fear. That was his first mistake. His second mistake came one breath later. He squeezed Betrayal's hand, looked down at my wedding ring-free left hand, and said just loud enough to sting, "You should have settled when you had the chance." I looked past him. Past the smug little performance, past Betrayal's polished face, straight to the far end of the hallway. Because that was when Evelyn Price finally stood up from the bench where she had been quietly reviewing one last document. And when she rose, she was not alone. Beside her stood a grey-haired man in a dark suit carrying a banker's file box. Daniel saw him. His smile changed, just slightly. Enough for me to notice. I knew that man. Daniel knew him too. He was Warren Pike. Daniel's former business accountant, and he was not supposed to be anywhere near that courthouse. Evelyn closed her folder, looked directly at my ex-husband, and said very calmly, "Good morning, Mr. Carter. Before we begin, there's been a late evidentiary development regarding the mortgage representations, the renovation reimbursements, and the hidden transfer tied to the Briarwood holding account." Daniel's face lost colour. Brielle looked at him, then at me, then back at him. And for the first time that morning, my ex-husband stopped smiling. For one beautiful second, Daniel looked exactly the way he had made me feel for months, unsteady. Just suddenly unsure of the ground beneath him. And for a man like Daniel Carter, uncertainty is not a small emotion. It is a crack in the costume. Brielle reacted first. She looked from Warren to Evelyn to Daniel, trying to figure out whether this was normal court drama or the beginning of a very bad surprise. "What is she talking about?" she asked. Daniel recovered quickly. Of course he did. Men like him build whole personalities on recovering quickly. He gave a small, dismissive laugh and adjusted his cuff. "Nothing. My ex-wife's attorney is trying to make herself feel important." Evelyn didn't blink. That was one of my favourite things about her. You could insult her, threaten her, posture in front of her, and she would just stand there with the same expression she might use if a lamp flickered. Warren, on the other hand, looked uncomfortable already. Not guilty exactly, more like a man who had recently learned the difference between quiet loyalty and criminal foolishness. Daniel turned toward him. "Warren, didn't expect to see you here." Warren didn't smile. Likewise. That one word tightened something around Daniel's mouth. He hated losing control of tone. Evelyn handed Daniel's attorney a sealed copy of the supplemental filing. His name was Martin Sloan's slick tie, silver hair, expensive briefcase, and the slightly tired face of a man who had spent many years defending clients more confident than honest. He opened the packet, scanned the first page, then looked up sharply. That got my attention, because lawyers are trained not to react unless something matters, and Martin Sloan had just reacted. Daniel saw it too. "What?" he asked. Martin lowered the pages slightly. "Where did this come from?" Evelyn answered without decoration. "Forensic accounting review, amended bank trace, and a cooperating witness." Her eyes flicked to Warren for half a second. Brielle's grip on Daniel's arm tightened. He looked at her, annoyed, not comforting, annoyed. Interesting. Because the moment the world stopped revolving exactly the way he expected, he was no longer a proud new man showing off a glamorous future. He was a cornered one. And cornered men do not perform tenderness for long. "This is nonsense," Daniel said. "Whatever stunt you're trying to pull, save it for inside." Evelyn closed her folder. "That is exactly where I intend to use it." Then she sat back down beside me like she had just discussed weather. Daniel remained standing. That was the shift. Until then, he had been the one controlling movement. Arriving late, walking up to me, leaning in, whispering threats, bringing Brielle like decoration. Now, he was the one left standing while everyone else acted like the hallway already belonged to process. A clerk opened the courtroom door and called the matter list. People started gathering bags and walking in. Daniel turned to Martin again. This changes nothing, right? Bad question. A very bad question. Because innocent men do not ask, this changes nothing, right? Martin's silence lasted 1 second too long, and Daniel noticed. So did Betrayal. I rose from the bench slowly, smoothed the front of my dress, picked up my tote, and walked past him without looking up. Naomi, he said. I stopped, turned just enough, and he searched my face for fear. He didn't find any. What do you think you found? He asked quietly. I looked at him for a moment, then said, probably less than what's actually there, and walked into the courtroom. Courtroom 4B was colder than the hallway and somehow more honest. Wooden benches, state seal, witness stand, elevated bench where a stranger would soon sort through the wreckage of our marriage with legal language and a schedule to keep. I have always liked courtrooms for one reason. Nobody cares who sighs the loudest in there. Nobody cares who smiles better. Nobody cares who won the room at dinner last night. Courtrooms are one of the few places where paper can beat performance if the paper is good enough. Evelyn and I sat at petitioner's table. Daniel and Martin sat at respondents. Betrayal moved toward the gallery, but not before touching Daniel's shoulder like she thought she was still part of the story. He patted her hand without turning. Not tenderness, management. The judge entered 3 minutes later. Judge Helena Ruiz, mid-60s, precise haircut, glasses low on the nose. The expression of a woman who had seen enough lies in family court to identify them by posture. We stood, she sat, we sat. The hearing began with formalities, property division, contested marital residence, allocation arguments, income representations, reimbursement claims. Martin spoke first. And I will give him this. He was polished. He made Daniel sound like the practical one, the financially burdened one. The man simply seeking equitable distribution of a valuable asset he had substantially maintained and supported throughout the marriage. Substantially maintained, that phrase again. He presented Daniel as the primary economic engine, me as emotionally attached but financially secondary. Classic, not evil, just strategic. Then he asked the court to approve either a forced sale or exclusive transfer terms weighted in Daniel's favour based on disproportionate contribution. That was the shape of their plan. Simple enough to sound reasonable, confident enough to pressure settlement, built on numbers they hoped would not be opened too deeply. Judge Ruiz nodded, took notes, and turned to Evelyn. Miss Price? Evelyn stood. And when I tell you the room changed, I mean it. She did not speak loudly. She did not shuffle dramatically. She did not pretend outrage. She simply rose with a kind of calm that makes everybody else nervous because it suggests the truth is already arranged in order. Your Honour, she said, respondent's presentation assumes 3 things that are no longer sustainable. She paused just long enough for the room to lean inward. First, that the marital residence was primarily acquired through shared marital funds. Second, that Mr. Carter's reported financial contributions are complete and accurately characterised. Third, that this court has been given a truthful picture of his asset movement during the period leading up to separation. Martin sat straighter. Daniel's hands clasped tighter on the table. Judge Ruiz looked over her glasses. You filed a supplemental notice this morning. I did. On what basis? Evelyn turned 1 page in her file. Tracing documents. Revised account analysis. contractor payment records, and testimony from a former financial intermediary who can address account routing and concealed transfers relevant to the resident's claim. Judge Ruiz glanced at the court clerk. Was the filing received? Yes, Your Honour. Martin rose immediately. Your Honour, we object to any attempt to ambush the respondent with late-produced material. Evelyn turned slightly. The material was produced as soon as concealment was confirmed. Judge Ruiz held up one hand, and just like that, both of them stopped. What concealment? The judge asked. Evelyn answered directly. A holding account registered under Briarwood Property Services received diverted funds during the final 14 months of the marriage. Those funds include renovation reimbursements, deferred commissions, and at least one transfer tied to respondent's business income that appears intentionally omitted from his sworn financial disclosures. The air in that courtroom changed. Just that tightening silence people make when a hearing stops being routine and starts becoming dangerous. Judge Ruiz turned to Martin. Is there an immediate explanation for that? Martin did something very smart. He did not answer quickly, because quick answers are how lawyers accidentally become witnesses to their own client's dishonesty. He looked at Daniel. That look lasted only a second, but it said everything. Tell me this is explainable. Daniel did not meet it well. His jaw locked. He leaned toward Martin and whispered something. Martin's expression did not improve. Good. Very good. Evelyn continued before they could rebuild momentum. Additionally, Your Honour, the original down payment source has now been fully traced. A substantial majority originated from petitioners' inherited separate funds, moved from a premarital account into the purchase structure. We have certified statements, transfer records, and contemporaneous communications supporting that characterization. Now, that mattered. Because the entire theatre Daniel had built around the house depended on one idea, that it was his domain, his prize, his leverage. But if the money trail started with me, and if his later contribution story was dirty, then the house was no longer sentimental ground. It was legal ground shifting under his shoes. Judge Ruiz reviewed the summary pages in silence. Then she asked the question that changed Daniel's posture completely. Was the Briarwood account disclosed in respondent's financial affidavit? Martin answered carefully. Not under that name, no. Judge Ruiz looked up. Why not? This time, Martin did not answer at all. He sat down slowly, and Daniel realised, right there in front of everyone, that his lawyer was no longer carrying him with the same confidence as before. That was the moment Betrayal stopped smiling in the gallery. Judge Ruiz turned back to Evelyn. Call your witness. Warren Pike rose from the second row. Daniel actually moved. Not much, just enough to betray panic. His chair scraped. He caught himself quickly and sat back down, but the damage was done. You can tell a lot about a man by which names disturb his breathing. Warren took the stand, was sworn in, and settled with visible discomfort. He was not built for drama. That worked in our favour. A polished liar looks impressive on television. In court, a reluctant accountant with clean records can be terrifying. Evelyn approached. Please state your name and professional background. He did. Certified public accountant. 15 years in private practice. Former outside accounting support for Daniel's business entities and related personal financial coordination. Former? Evelyn asked. Yes. When did that relationship end? Approximately 6 weeks ago. Why? Martin objected. Relevance. Evelyn answered, before the judge could. Bias and Credibility Foundation. Judge Ruiz nodded. Overruled. He may answer. Warren swallowed. Because I was asked to characterize certain transfers in ways I was no longer comfortable defending. There it was. Not dramatic. Better. Boring. Boring sentences destroy liars. Evelyn walked him through the Briarwood account. How it was used. How reimbursement flows were routed. How certain renovation-related funds that should have appeared cleanly in disclosure were instead parked, delayed, or mislabeled. How one contractor rebate tied to the house ended up moving through an account structure that made Daniel's contribution picture appear stronger than it was. Then came the hidden transfer. A commission payout from a commercial deal Daniel had delayed reporting during active separation talks. It had been moved, broken into pieces, and partially used to support a new lease arrangement tied to Brielle's condo. That one landed like a hammer. Not because the money itself was enormous, because it connected everything. The affair, the hidden account, the missing disclosure, the house fight. The new wife, sitting in the gallery wearing confidence, financed by the same man claiming hardship and superior property contribution in court. Martin objected again, harder this time. Your Honour, this is turning into a character prosecution. Judge Ruiz didn't even look impressed. No, it's turning into a disclosure problem. That sentence hit Daniel in the throat. He shifted toward Martin, whispering urgently, now. Brielle looked at him from the gallery with a face I recognised instantly. Not heartbreak, recalculation. A woman beginning to wonder whether the man she upgraded to came with hidden damage attached. Evelyn moved to exhibits next. Bank records, transfer chains, purchase account statements, renovation invoices, the inheritance account, email snippets, one text. That text was a masterpiece. Not because it was dramatic, because it was casual. Daniel had sent it to Warren months before separation. Need to keep the house picture clean. Naomi gets emotional about her money. Just route the patio and roof reimbursements through Briarwood until after filings. That was it, that smug little sentence. The kind men write when they think everybody around them is either loyal, stupid, or delete capable. Judge Ruiz read it twice. Then once more, the room went completely still. Even the court reporter seemed to hit the keys with extra respect after that. I did not look at Daniel immediately. I looked at my hands because I wanted to stay steady. Because anger is satisfying, but composure is power in places like that. Still, I could feel him unravelling beside me without turning my head. The judge finally looked up. Mr. Sloane, she said to Martin, did your client inform you of this communication? Martin's face had gone professionally blank, which is lawyer language for I hate my morning now. No, Your Honour. Judge Ruiz nodded once. Then she looked directly at Daniel. Mr. Carter, you are reminded that financial affidavits and representations to this court are sworn submissions. If I find intentional concealment or manipulated asset characterization, property allocation becomes the least of your problems. There it was. Not a ruling, a warning. And good judges know exactly how to say a warning, so it sounds like the whole way to something worse. Daniel stood suddenly. Your Honour, this is being twisted. My wife, my ex-wife, has always tried to make me look dishonest because she can't accept the divorce. Bad move. Very bad move. Judge Ruiz's expression hardened instantly. Sit down. He did. That fast. And I will not lie to you, that was satisfying. Because the man, who had leaned in outside the courtroom, whispering that I was losing the house, was now being told to sit by a woman who had no interest in his charm, his jawline, his new wife, or his expensive suit. Evelyn didn't rush. She knew the room was already ours for the moment. Then she said, "One final point, Your Honour." She lifted another document. Respondent has repeatedly characterised himself as being uniquely positioned to maintain the marital residence. However, records from the mortgage servicer show petitioner's credit profile was the deciding factor in refinancing approval 3 years ago. Without petitioner's employment history and debt-to-income stability, the residence likely would not have remained under its current terms. That one landed in a different way. Less scandal. More humiliation. Because it stripped Daniel of the myth he loved most, that he was the one who made the house possible. No, he performed importance. I stabilized reality. Judge Ruiz leaned back slightly. "Miss Price, are you seeking a continuance for full evidentiary hearing or partial ruling today?" Evelyn answered without hesitation. "Partial ruling on possession and preservation, Your Honour, and an order restraining respondent from any attempt to leverage undisclosed funds, force sale pressure, or occupancy intimidation pending final allocation." Occupancy intimidation. Beautiful phrase. It translated to, "This man has been acting like swagger is a deed. Please stop him." Martin rose carefully this time. No big speech, no theatrics, just damage control. He requested time to review, challenged scope, insisted that some transfers had innocent business explanations, and tried to keep the issue from becoming a full credibility collapse. Smart lawyering. Too late. Because the problem with arrogance is that it spends your margin before court even begins. Daniel had walked in too proud, too smug, too certain. He had brought Betrayal. He had whispered threats. He had made himself the face of a clean win. So when the truth started leaking, it didn't just weaken his case, it humiliated him. Judge Ruiz took a short recess to review the filings. As soon as she exited, Daniel turned fully toward Martin. No smile, no performance, just raw anger. "You said this was contained." Martin's voice stayed low but sharp. "I said full disclosure mattered. I asked you 3 times about side accounts." Daniel glanced toward me then, like somehow this was my fault for not staying frightened enough. Betrayal rose from the gallery and walked to the table. "What side accounts?" she asked. He didn't answer her. Interesting. A man in love would reassure. A man exposed prioritizes collapse management. Evelyn remained seated beside me, calmly reviewing notes like people were not unravelling 10 feet away. I leaned toward her. "How bad is it?" Without looking up, she said, "For him? Yes." She turned one page. "Bad enough that he's no longer thinking about winning the house." That sent a calm warmth through my chest. Not gloating. Correction. Outside in the hallway, he had whispered that I was losing everything. Now, less than an hour later, his whole ambition had shrunk to survival. The courtroom door opened again. The bailiff called everyone back to order. Judge Ruiz returned, sat, and adjusted the supplemental file in front of her. Then she delivered the sentence that made my ex-husband's entire morning collapse. "Pending final allocation," she said. "Exclusive temporary possession of the marital residence will remain with petitioner Naomi Carter. Respondent is ordered to cease any direct or indirect pressure regarding forced relinquishment and no transfer, encumbrance, or occupancy interference will occur absent further court order. Daniel's face emptied, not dramatically, just emptied, as if somebody had reached inside and pulled out the story he came there to perform. Judge Ruiz continued, "Additionally, the court will set an expedited evidentiary review regarding disclosure irregularities and potential sanctions. Respondent is ordered to produce complete records tied to Briarwood Property Services and any related holding structures within 10 business days. 10 business days. That was not a victory lap. That was a countdown, and Daniel knew it." I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Because across the room, my lawyer still hadn't even sat down yet, and my ex-husband had already lost the one thing he came there to take. But the hearing wasn't finished. Because just as Judge Ruiz began addressing timelines, Betrayal stood up from the gallery and said, in a voice everybody heard, "Your Honour, I think there's something else you should know." Daniel whipped his head toward her so fast it looked like fear finally had hands. The entire courtroom turned toward Betrayal. Even Judge Ruiz looked mildly surprised. And that woman did not look surprised easily. Daniel's face changed so fast it was almost violent. Fear. Real fear. And that was interesting, because up until then, he had still been trying to manage the room. Even after the account problem, even after the possession ruling, even after the judge warned him about disclosures, some part of him still believed he could wrestle the hearing back into shape. But when Betrayal stood up, that belief cracked. "Sit down," he snapped. Bad move. Very bad move. Because if there is one thing a courtroom notices quickly, it is a man trying to shut someone up before she speaks. Judge Ruiz lifted her eyes over her glasses. "Mr. Carter," she said, voice flat, "you will not instruct anyone in my courtroom." Daniel sat back immediately. Betrayal remained standing. Her hands were shaking, but not enough to hide the anger in her face. Judge Ruiz looked at her. "Ma'am, if you have relevant information, you will need to state your full name and understand that anything you say may lead to formal testimony." Betrayal swallowed. "My name is Betrayal Harlow." "Interesting. Not Carter. Not yet." She looked at Daniel once, then away from him. And that was when I knew whatever she said next was not planned. Good. The best truth usually isn't. "I don't know if this is relevant," she said, "but if this is about hidden money and that Briarwood account, I've seen that name before." The room went still. Daniel shut his eyes for half a second. That tiny movement told me everything. Judge Ruiz folded her hands. "Where have you seen it?" Betrayal hesitated, then said, "I moved into a condo 5 months ago. Daniel told me it was a temporary lease through one of his business contacts. He handled the deposit, the furnishing allowance, and some of the monthly payments through what he called a service account. I didn't ask questions because..." She glanced at him, then away again. "Because I thought it was part of his company structure." Daniel leaned toward Martin and whispered fiercely. Martin didn't even look at him. That was another good sign. Because once a lawyer stops making eye contact with his client, it usually means the client has become a demolition site. Judge Ruiz asked, "Was this condo arrangement in place before the parties' separation was finalised?" "Yes." "During the marriage?" Betrayal looked sick now. "Yes." That landed like a dropped weight in the courtroom. Not because the affair itself was new, because now money tied it to timing, and timing tied it to disclosure, and disclosure tied it to the house. Judge Ruiz made a note. Then another. Did you understand those funds to be separate from marital resources? Brielle's answer came out quietly. I understood what he told me. Again, a powerful sentence. Because it exposed him. Daniel finally lost patience with silence. Your Honour, this is absurd. She doesn't understand any of the financial structure. She's confused. Brielle turned on him so sharply even I felt it. Confused? She said. There it was. The glamour was gone now. The polished courtroom girlfriend energy, the little superior smile, the careful outfit designed to say I won all of it had burned off. What remained was a woman finding out she had been used inside a story she thought she controlled. You told me the condo was clean, she said. You said all of this was handled. You said she was dragging things out because she was bitter. Judge Ruiz tapped her pen once. Miss Harlow, direct your comments to the court. Brielle inhaled hard. Yes, Your Honour. Then she said the sentence that pushed the morning into another level of trouble. He also told me the house was basically already his. Daniel went rigid. Not angry rigid, court rigid. The judge looked at him. Did you say that, Mr. Carter? Martin rose first. Smart man. Your Honour, I would caution against turning spontaneous statements from a non-party observer into findings without proper foundation. Legally smart, but weak in a very specific way. Because he was no longer arguing strength, he was arguing containment. Judge Ruiz nodded slightly. Noted. Miss Harlow will either testify properly or not at all. Then she looked at Brielle. Do you wish to continue and be sworn? And there it was, the fork in the road. Brielle looked at Daniel. He stared back at her with all the charm stripped off. He wasn't trying to soothe her. He was warning her with his face. Do not do this. Do not make this worse. Do not stop being useful. And that was the moment she understood what I had understood months earlier. A man like Daniel only loves you properly while you are convenient. Once you become risky, he starts speaking to you like a problem. Brielle lifted her chin. Yes, she said. I do. Daniel muttered. Unbelievable. No one cared. She was sworn in, and now the hearing had a different electricity. Not just because she was the new wife. Because she was the new wife who had just chosen self-preservation over loyalty. Evelyn stood. Not rushed. Never rushed. Miss Harlow, she said, when Mr. Carter arranged your residence, did he ever describe the source of those funds as business reimbursements or service routing through Briarwood? Yes. Did he ever tell you those same channels were part of an ongoing marital property dispute? No. Did he ever say the house was not yet decided by the court? Brielle looked at Daniel again. He said it was a formality, she answered. That Naomi was emotional and didn't understand how property works. There it was again. Emotional. That lazy little word weak men use when they need to minimize women who are about to out-document them. Evelyn continued. Did Mr. Carter ever discuss keeping funds or property arrangements clean until after filings? Brielle blinked, then frowned. Yes, she said slowly. Once. He said something like that on a call. I remember, because I asked what he meant, and he laughed. What did he say he meant? Brielle answered. He said, it just means not everything has to be visible at the same time. The courtroom went dead quiet. That sentence was not as strong as the text to Warren. But together? Together they formed a pattern so ugly even Martin Sloane looked tired. Daniel leaned forward, suddenly. She's twisting things she doesn't understand. Judge Ruiz looked at him. And if I live to be 100, I will still enjoy what she said next. Mr. Carter, she said, the people around you keep misunderstanding in very consistent directions. That line hit him harder than shouting ever could have, because it was precise. Precise humiliation is always more satisfying than loud humiliation. Brielle sat straighter now, finding momentum. There's more, she said. Martin rubbed his forehead. Of course there was more. Judge Ruiz nodded. Go on. Brielle took a breath. 2 weeks ago, Daniel told me that after today he'd finally be able to unlock the equity and move things around the way he wanted. He said once the house issue was closed, he could stop pretending he was squeezed. Evelyn didn't even smile. She just said, Did you understand him to be financially strained? No. Did he present himself that way in this matter? Yes. Martin objected again, but it was thinner now. Judge Ruiz allowed limited answer. And that was enough, because everybody in the room understood the point. Daniel had told different financial stories to different women depending on which one he needed compliant. That was who he was. Not a man in love who made mistakes. A manager of narratives, and narrative managers panic in court because documents don't get flattered into changing. By then, Daniel's anger had curdled into something uglier. Desperation. He wasn't looking at me anymore. That told me a lot. He had come into court wanting to beat me. Now he was just trying not to drown in front of everyone else. Evelyn sat down. Martin rose for cross-examination, and I'll give him credit again, he did his best. He framed Brielle as emotionally reactive, financially unsophisticated, not a party to the filings, not a records custodian, not someone who could define structures or legal disclosure duties. All true enough. But it didn't save Daniel, because Brielle wasn't there to establish the accounting foundation. Warren had already done that. She was there to show intent, tone, confidence, the way Daniel had spoken when he thought no judge was listening. And that is often where liars really destroy themselves. Judge Ruiz reviewed her notes in silence. Then she looked directly at Daniel. Mr. Carter, I'm going to ask you one question before I determine next procedural steps. I advise you to answer carefully. Daniel nodded stiffly. Did you knowingly omit or obscure any account, transfer, reimbursement, or payment stream relevant to the marital residence or your ability to pay during this proceeding? This was it. The kind of question that splits a morning in half. If he said no, and the records later proved otherwise, the sanctions problem got worse. If he said yes, he cut himself open on the record. For the first time since I had known him, Daniel Carter looked small, not physically, internally. He glanced at Martin. Martin did not rescue him. Daniel began, then stopped. Judge Ruiz waited. No one moved. No one shuffled paper. The whole courtroom held still around his answer. Finally, he said, not intentionally, there it was. The coward's compromise. Not a denial, not an admission, a muddy little phrase built to leave him room to run in either direction later. Judge Ruiz's face did not change, which was worse for him than anger. Understood, she said. Then she delivered the next blow. I am converting this matter into a broader evidentiary review on financial credibility and potential sanctions exposure. Temporary possession remains with petitioner. Respondent's request regarding immediate house disposition is denied at this stage. Denied. That word sat in the room like clean steel. Daniel looked forward. Brielle stared at him. I sat perfectly still. Judge Ruiz continued. Further, pending full review, respondent is restrained from dissipating, redirecting, or encumbering any assets connected to Briarwood Property Services, related holding channels, or proceeds arguably linked to the marital estate. Violation will be viewed seriously. Then Evelyn rose one final time. Your Honour, one housekeeping request. Judge Ruiz nodded. Given respondent's hallway statements to petitioner this morning, his prior pressure regarding forced surrender, and the new evidence concerning concealed financial movement, we request that all communication regarding the residence go through counsel only, no direct contact. Judge Ruiz looked at Daniel. Any objection? Martin answered quietly, No, Your Honour. That might have been my favourite part of the whole hearing. Not the denial, not Brielle turning, not even the judge warning him. That little no, Your Honour, because outside in the hallway he had leaned close and whispered that I was losing the house today. And now, in open court, his own side was agreeing that he should not even be allowed to speak to me about it directly anymore. That is what satisfying revenge looks like sometimes. A series of clean doors closing in public. The judge set the next date and ended the morning. Court is adjourned. We stood. Papers moved. Chairs shifted. But the emotional hearing wasn't over, because courtrooms end on schedule. People don't. Daniel turned to Brielle first. Not me. Of course not. Because by then I was no longer the person he could intimidate. I was the reason his day had gone bad. Brielle stepped back before he could say a word. That alone was delicious. Don't, she said. His face darkened. You picked now? She laughed once, sharp and offended. You lied to me. He lowered his voice, but not enough. I protected you. There is no sentence a manipulative man loves more than that one. I protected you. As if secrecy is generosity. As if deception is care. As if women should be grateful for being kept in the dark. Brielle's face changed again. Now it wasn't just anger. It was humiliation. What exactly did you protect me from? She asked. The truth? The missing money? Or the fact that you told me this was basically done? Martin stepped between them with the exhausted professionalism of a man who had clearly not planned to referee a relationship collapse before lunch. Not here, he muttered. Daniel looked past him at me. Finally. And there it was. No smile, no smugness, no whisper, just hatred and disbelief. As if he still could not process how the woman he had spent months talking down to was standing there calm while his whole little stage collapsed. I held his gaze, said nothing. That silence hurt him more than victory speeches would have. Evelyn leaned toward me. Do not engage. I wasn't going to. I know, she said. That's why this is going well. We started gathering our things, and that should have been it. It should have ended there, with the ruling in my favour, and Daniel stumbling out of court, with his confidence hanging off him in strips. But just as we turned toward the side exit, the court clerk hurried back into the room, carrying another document packet. Miss Price? Evelyn turned. The clerk handed her the file. This was just logged at intake for related submission. It references the Carter matter and came from county records. Counsel asked that it be delivered before parties depart. Evelyn took it. Brows knit. Opened it, then went still. Now, I had seen her calm in all forms by then. Calm before attack, calm during attack, calm during cross. This was different. This was the calm of a woman finding something she had not expected and immediately understanding it mattered a great deal. What? I asked. She didn't answer right away. She turned one page, then another, then finally looked up at me. Naomi, she said quietly, did Daniel ever tell you he put a lien against the house last year? I stared at her. What? Across the room, Daniel heard it, and the second he did, he moved, not toward me, toward the door, fast, too fast for an innocent man. Daniel, Martin snapped. Too late. Judge Ruiz had already risen halfway from her chair because the hearing was technically over, but courtrooms don't become lawless just because the official words are finished. The bailiff stepped forward immediately. Sir, Daniel stopped. Not because he wanted to. Because the tone in that room had changed from family court tension to something more dangerous. Procedural alarm. And once a courtroom smells procedural alarm, everyone wakes up. Martin closed his eyes for half a second like a man picturing his blood pressure in numeric form. Brielle looked shocked. No, not shocked. Offended again. That was becoming her natural expression. Because every new reveal was forcing her to understand the same thing from a different angle. She had not married a decisive man. She had attached herself to a man who only looked decisive while women absorbed his consequences for him. The bailiff stood between Daniel and the exit. You need to stay put. Daniel turned back slowly, rage and fear trying to wear the same face. I'm not under arrest. The bailiff didn't blink. Then standing still should be easy. That nearly made me smile. Nearly. Evelyn was already scanning the document packet with the calm intensity of a woman who had just been handed one more piece of a machine she suspected was rotten to the centre. Judge Ruiz remained on the bench now. Counsel, she said, what exactly is in that submission? Evelyn looked up. A recorded lien instrument against the marital residence, Your Honour, filed last year. Amount appears to be just under $190,000. The courtroom went still again. There are many kinds of silence. This one was the most expensive yet, because affairs embarrass people. Hidden money worries them. But a lien against the house? A lien changes the geometry of everything. It means somebody reached into the property itself. It means value was touched. It means leverage was borrowed against a home one spouse is now standing in court pretending to be nobly trying to preserve. Judge Ruiz's expression hardened immediately. Was this disclosed? Evelyn answered, Not in any clean form provided to us, Your Honour. We have references to debt service pressure, but no direct voluntary disclosure of a recorded encumbrance against the residents. All eyes went to Martin, poor Martin. By then, he had the face of a man who had been hired to defend a leaking boat only to discover it was mostly made of holes. He turned toward Daniel very slowly. Is there a lien? He asked. That question mattered, because it told the room his lawyer had not known either. Daniel looked trapped. Not morally trapped, professionally trapped, socially trapped, legally trapped. Cornered in public by paper. It was temporary, he muttered. Judge Ruiz's voice cut across the room like wire. That was not my question. Daniel swallowed. Yes, there it was. Simple, small, deadly. I did not move, did not blink, did not make the mistake of enjoying the moment visibly. Because this was no longer just satisfying. This was dangerous for him, for the house, for the case. Evelyn handed the lien abstract to the clerk and then to the bench. County recording date is 11 months prior, she said. Lender appears to be a private facility linked to commercial bridge debt. That made Martin go pale. Because a private bridge lender is not how stable, well-disclosed family money behaves. That is how men with ego and cash flow problems buy time, while telling everyone around them they are in control. Judge Ruiz reviewed the first page, then the second. Then she looked directly at Daniel. You encumbered the marital residence without transparent disclosure during these proceedings. Daniel tried to straighten. It wasn't like that. Interesting choice. Not it was disclosed. Just that pathetic little sentence people use when facts are too clear to deny and too ugly to describe honestly. Evelyn spoke before he could muddy it further. Your Honour, the source filing indicates the residence was used as collateral support for a debt facility connected to a business entity not jointly held by petitioner. Now the problem was not merely hidden debt. It was hidden debt attached to his business interests using our house. Our house. The house. He had the nerve to walk into court and say I was losing. The house, partly paid for with my inheritance. The house stabilised by my income. The house he had treated like a wallet with walls. I felt something cold settle inside me. Not rage, resolution. A final, clean kind. Judge Ruiz placed the file down carefully. Mr. Carter, why? That one word landed harder than a speech would have. Why? Why put a lien on the house? Why hide it? Why force litigation over a property you had already secretly used as collateral? Daniel's answer came out defensive and thin. I had liquidity issues on one development. It was supposed to clear. It was business. Business. That magic male word again. Business. As if the syllables themselves should turn recklessness into seriousness. Judge Ruiz was not impressed. So you leveraged the marital residence for a business problem. It wasn't permanent. It was real, she said. He opened his mouth and closed it. Yes, exactly. It was real. Martin spoke then, choosing his steps carefully. Your Honour, I need a moment with my client. Judge Ruiz nodded once, but her voice stayed cold. You may have 3 minutes. Do not mistake that courtesy for patience. Martin turned to Daniel so sharply, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. What else? He whispered. And let me tell you, that question was beautiful. Not because it was loud, because it acknowledged the truth everyone now understood. A man caught lying rarely has only one lie left. Daniel rubbed his forehead hard. Nothing. Martin gave him a look so empty it was almost elegant. I no longer believe that word coming from you. That landed on Daniel harder than anything else in the room. Because when your own lawyer stops believing your most basic answer, the costume is finished. Brielle stood a few feet away, arms folded tightly across herself now. No more soft hand-holding. No more polished couple image. She looked at Daniel the way people look at luxury goods after discovering the stitching is fake. "What did you do?" she asked. He snapped at once. "Not now. Bad move again. Because once the room smells weakness, every little command you give sounds ridiculous." Brielle laughed once, sharp and hurt. "That seems to be your favourite phrase." He looked at her like he wanted obedience, silence, loyalty, something. She gave him none of it. Good. Because I had spent too much of my marriage giving him forms of patience he had not earned. It was satisfying to watch another woman stop doing it in real time. Evelyn leaned toward me while they hissed at each other. "This helps us," she said quietly. I assumed. "It helps us a lot." "How much?" She did not smile, but there was steel in her eyes. If the lien was hidden, tied to non-marital leverage, and connected to misconduct touching the house itself, we're no longer simply arguing possession. We're arguing damage. That mattered a lot, because until then, Daniel's threat had been built on one simple dramatic image. "You're losing the house today." Now the picture had flipped. He wasn't the rightful man fighting for his property. He was the man who had quietly tied a rope around the house and handed one end to a lender. Judge Ruiz called the room back to order before the 3 minutes fully expired. We resumed. Martin rose first this time, but he did not posture. No slickness left, no grand architecture. Just controlled triage. Your Honour, respondent acknowledges the lien existed. He maintains it was temporary bridge support related to business timing, not an attempt to dissipate the marital estate. However, in light of the new documentation, we understand the court's concern and request a limited opportunity to supplement the record before further conclusions are drawn. Smart lawyering again. But the problem with asking for patience after deception is that patience starts sounding like a reward. Judge Ruiz turned to Evelyn. "Miss Price?" Evelyn stood. "Your Honour, we oppose any framing of this as harmless timing. The marital residence was used as collateral for outside risk without transparent disclosure. Petitioner continued carrying household stability while respondent postured as principal protector of the property. He then sought to use that same house as a litigation weapon against her. Judge Ruiz nodded slightly. Remedy?" Evelyn was ready. "We request immediate order preserving petitioner's exclusive possession, prohibition on any further encumbrance, mandatory disclosure of all loan-related documents, lender notices, and associated communications, plus a temporary freeze on respondent's ability to represent sole leverage authority over the residence in any forum." Beautiful, clean, strategic, and humiliating in exactly the right way, because it took away his favourite weapon, swagger, disguised as ownership. Judge Ruiz wrote for a long moment. Then she looked up. "Granted in substantial part." Daniel's face emptied again. Judge Ruiz continued, and every sentence felt like a lock clicking shut. "Petitioner's exclusive temporary possession remains in full force." Click. "Respondent is prohibited from further encumbering, transferring, or leveraging the marital residence directly or indirectly." Click. Respondent will produce the full lien file, loan applications, supporting business documentation, and all lender communications within 7 business days. Click. Any failure in production, any inconsistency, or any attempt to obscure related assets will be considered in sanctions, credibility findings, and final equitable allocation. Click. And then the sentence that made the entire morning worth it. On the current record, respondent's position that petitioner should surrender the residence is not merely unsupported. It is undermined by his own conduct. There it was. Official. On the record. The man who whispered that I was losing the house had just been told by a judge that his own behaviour had weakened his claim to it. I stayed still. Because loud victory would have cheapened what the law was already doing beautifully on its own. Daniel, however, could not stand still inside himself anymore. "This is ridiculous," he said. "Everyone is acting like I stole something." Judge Ruiz looked at him with open impatience. "You leveraged something," she said, quietly, "against a spouse who had a material stake in it during a proceeding where transparency was required. Do not ask this court to admire the distinction." That line might have been the end of him socially if anybody from his business circles ever heard it. And somehow I suspected they would. The hearing ended for the second time. This time, it actually held. The judge exited, the bailiff relaxed, the clerk gathered filings. But again, the real drama didn't stop just because the official one did. Brielle turned on Daniel the moment the bench cleared. "You said the house issue was over," she hissed. "You said Naomi was dragging this out because she was bitter and sentimental." He snapped back. "This is not the place." "No," she said, voice rising. "Apparently, no place is ever the place when you're lying." Martin picked up his briefcase with the stiff energy of a man planning to bill for emotional damage. "Mr. Farr!" "Carter," he said quietly, "from this point on, you tell me everything. Every account, every lender, every side promise, every arrangement. If I learn about one more surprise from anybody other than you, I'm done." There are many ways a man can be humiliated, but there is something special about hearing your own lawyer tell you he may walk away while your new wife stares at you like a defective investment. Daniel looked around then. At Martin. At Brielle. At me. And that was when it finally reached him. He had come in with an audience. He was leaving with witnesses. I stood, slid my papers into my tote, and looked at him for the first time since the lien surfaced. He searched my face desperately, then not for pity, not for love, not even for reconciliation, for collapse. He wanted to see that I was still tied enough to him for this to hurt visibly. He found calm instead. That wounded him. Good. Because a person who has spent months trying to destabilize you deserves to meet the version of you he failed to break. We started toward the side exit. Then Daniel said my name, not loudly, but with the old command in it, Naomi. I stopped and turned. Evelyn didn't love that, I could tell, but she let me have the moment. He looked wrecked now. Not ruined yet, but no longer composed. "What do you want?" I asked. He stared at me a second too long before saying, "You knew." Interesting. Not, "Did you know?" Just accusation. You knew about Warren. You knew about the account. Yes. His mouth tightened. You set this up. And there, finally, was the line that made everything clear. Even now, standing in the wreckage of his own choices, he still wanted the story to be that I had done something aggressive. Not that he had done something dishonest. So I answered him in the calmest voice I had. No, Daniel, you set it up. I just stopped protecting you from it. That one landed. Really landed. Because it named the whole marriage in one sentence. All the times I covered gaps, smoothed awkwardness, absorbed instability, believed stories that were convenient to him and corrosive to me. I had protected him from consequences for years. Now I wasn't. And that was all the revenge required. Brielle stared at me, then at him, and I watched her understand, maybe for the first time, that she had not stolen some weak, abandoned wife's leftovers. She had stepped into a job. The job of absorbing Daniel's mess until her usefulness expired. Her face hardened. Good! Maybe she would learn something after all. Evelyn lightly touched my elbow. We're done here. I nodded, and we walked out. The hallway felt different now. Same courthouse smell, same benches, same bad coffee. Same people waiting on their own disasters. But the air around me had changed. Lighter. Not happy, not healed, just lighter. Like a tight wire had finally snapped in the right direction. We made it halfway to the elevators before Evelyn's phone buzzed. She glanced down, stopped walking, read it once. Then again, I knew that face by now. Not surprise. Opportunity. What? I asked. She looked up slowly. The lender listed on the lien, she said. They just contacted my office. My heartbeat shifted. Why? Evelyn slid the phone into her bag. Because according to them, the loan may already be in default. For 1 second, I thought I had heard her wrong. In default? We were standing in the courthouse hallway with my tote on one shoulder, her folder under one arm, and the wreckage of my marriage still echoing behind us. Evelyn gave one sharp nod. Yes, that single word changed the whole shape of the day, because up until then, Daniel had been arrogant, dishonest, manipulative, and desperate. But this meant he had not just lied about the house. He had walked into court threatening to take a property he may already have damaged, badly enough that a lender was preparing to squeeze it. That is a special kind of stupidity. The dangerous kind. The kind fueled by ego. Evelyn lowered her voice. The lender's preliminary contact suggests there were missed compliance conditions attached to the bridge facility, possibly reporting failures, possibly payment defaults. They aren't saying everything yet, but they're worried enough to start protecting their position. On the house? Yes! That made the floor feel strangely steady under my feet. Not because it was good news exactly, because it confirmed something I think a lot of women know long before it becomes legally useful. Men like Daniel often speak the loudest when they are covering panic. All those months of swagger, all those little threats, all those smug settlement offers, all those comments about me being emotional and not understanding business. And the whole time, under the floorboards, he had fire crawling toward the foundation. We walked toward the side conference alcove near the elevators. We need to move carefully now, Evelyn said. A defaulted private lien can get ugly fast. If the lender accelerates, they may try to pressure resolution through any available angle. But today's court order helps a lot. How much is a lot? She turned to me. Enough that Daniel can no longer use the house as a bluff. Not with us, not with the court, and not with a lender sniffing around. That was all I needed to hear. For the first time in months, I felt something that was not anger, not grief, not exhaustion, control, not total control. Life never gives you that, but enough. Enough to breathe differently. We had just reached the elevator bank when Daniel's voice hit the hallway behind us. Naomi. I stopped. Of course he had come after me. Men like Daniel cannot stand watching a woman walk away from the version of the story they wrote for her. I turned slowly. He was walking toward us, with Martin behind him, and Brielle farther back, no longer eager to keep up. Daniel's face looked worse up close. Not ruined, but frayed. His tie was slightly off-centre now. His hair no longer perfect. His confidence no longer fitted. Interesting how quickly arrogance starts to wrinkle under fluorescent lights. Evelyn stepped half a pace in front of me. That made me love her even more. Daniel held up one hand. I'm not here for a scene. No, Evelyn said. You're here because your morning collapsed. He ignored her and looked at me. Can we talk? There it was. Not in court, not through counsel, not after the hearing, just that simple little request men make when they think direct access is still something they deserve. I almost said no immediately. Almost. But then I looked at him properly, and I realised I wanted to hear what desperation sounded like in his voice when he no longer had a courtroom, a hallway whisper, or a smug performance to hide behind. So I said, You have 1 minute. Evelyn checked her watch theatrically. Bless her. Daniel exhaled. This has gone too far. Amazing sentence. A man cheats, lies, hides money, brings his new wife to court like a trophy, threatens his ex in the hallway, gets caught using the house as collateral, and then says, This has gone too far. I folded my arms. No, it's finally gone far enough. His mouth tightened. Naomi, listen to me. The lien was a temporary measure. I was closing a complicated project. It would have cleared. I stared at him. There is something almost fascinating about how often you say things as if intention should erase conduct. He shook his head. You don't understand the pressure I was under. That almost got a smile out of Evelyn. I answered before she could. You're right. I only understood the mortgage payments, the bills, the repairs, the refinancing support, the groceries, the taxes, the emotional labour, the lies, the affair, and the legal clean-up. But no, I probably missed the difficult part. That hit good! He stepped closer, lowering his voice. If this lender thing becomes a problem, the house could get dragged into a bigger mess. There already is a bigger mess, I said. You. For 1 second, he looked like he might snap. Not physically, verbally. I saw it in the twitch around his mouth, the heat in his eyes, the way men look when their preferred version of reality is being denied too calmly. But then he reined it back in, because he needed something. And when a man needs something, he rediscovers manners very quickly. I'm asking you to be reasonable, he said. There it was again. Reasonable. Another favourite word men use when they want women to participate quietly in cleaning up male recklessness. I tilted my head slightly. Did I seem unreasonable when I paid half the house bills while you played investor? Was I unreasonable when I refinanced with my credit profile holding the structure together? Was I unreasonable when I found your affair and still gave you a clean exit? Or is this the part where reasonable means useful to you? He had no answer for that. Of course not. because the truth does not leave much room for elegant lies. Behind him, Brielle had stopped near the wall, watching us. Her face was different now. Not smug, not superior. Just tired and quietly furious. Good. Let her learn. Daniel tried one more angle. If the lender accelerates, neither of us wins. That was the closest thing to honesty he had said all day. I glanced at Evelyn. She said nothing, but I knew that look. She wanted me to let him keep talking. Liars get generous with information once fear starts loosening their mouths. So I asked, "How bad is it?" He hesitated. That was answer enough, but I wanted numbers, not instinct. "How bad, Daniel?" His jaw worked once before he finally said, "There were delays," in English. "The project stalled." And? The lender got impatient. And? He looked away, then said, "I may have cross-collateralized too aggressively." Evelyn actually let out a tiny laugh through her nose. That was a terrible sign for him. Because when a woman like Evelyn laughs, it means the lie has become boring. "In English," I repeated. Daniel's eyes snapped back to mine. "I used the house to buy time." There it was. Clean, ugly, finally plain. I let the sentence sit between us. He used the house to buy time. My house too. The place where I cooked dinners, corrected essays, wrapped Christmas gifts, painted walls, sat through flu seasons, nursed migraines, hosted birthdays, folded laundry, and built a life. He had turned it into a lever, an object to maneuver. That was the moment any softness still alive in me died completely. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. Like a light going out in a room nobody was ever going to enter again. I nodded once. "Thank you." He looked confused. For what? For finally saying one honest thing. Then I turned to Evelyn. Whatever the lender needs from us, they get through counsel. Every document, every timeline. And I want emergency protection motions ready if this touches possession. Daniel's face changed. Panic again. "Naomi," I looked back at him. "No, you don't get to use my name like a rope anymore." That one landed. Hard. He took a breath, tried once more, and this time the mask slipped enough for the real man underneath to show. "You think you're punishing me," he said quietly. "But you're going to hurt yourself too." There it was, the old marriage voice, the one that translated to "submit now or I'll make the consequences sound mutual." I smiled. Not warmly, not bitterly, just clearly. That only worked when I still believed you knew more than I did. Behind him, Brielle actually flinched, because she heard it too. Not just as a line between ex-spouses, as a warning, maybe the first useful warning she had gotten in months. Daniel saw her reaction and turned on her instantly. "This is partly your fault too." That was it. That was the sentence that finished him. Because even after everything, even after the affair, the hidden money, the condo, the courtroom collapse, the lien, the default threat even now, his instinct was to spread blame onto the nearest woman. Not accountability, distribution. Brielle went still, then very calm. "I wondered when you'd do that," she said. He blinked. "What? Make me part of your mess." He took a step toward her. "Brielle," she stepped back. And that tiny movement might have been more satisfying than the entire hearing. Because it was simple. No screaming, no tears. Just a woman deciding the man in front of her was no longer safe to stand close to. Martin approached then, briefcase in hand, face set in the kind of grim professionalism that means private patience has expired. "Mr. Carter," he said, "stop talking." Daniel looked at him like he had been slapped. Martin continued, low and deadly. "You have now said enough damaging things in one morning to make my job significantly harder than it needed to be. From this second forward, you say nothing to anyone without me present. Not your ex-wife, not Miss Harlow, not the lender, no one." That was beautiful too, because arrogant men hate two things most when they start falling: being told to be quiet and being told by another man. Daniel looked around, at me, at Brielle, at Martin, at Evelyn. And for the first time all day, there was no place left for him to stand that still made him look important. Good, because importance that depends on deception deserves to die in public. Evelyn pressed the elevator button. While we waited, Brielle spoke again. Not to Daniel, to me. "Did you know," she asked quietly, "about the condo money?" I looked at her. No, but I knew enough about him to keep digging. That hurt her. I could see it. Again, not because she cared so deeply about what he did to me, because she was finally seeing that what felt like special treatment was often just preloaded dishonesty wearing charm. She nodded slowly. Then, after a long pause, said, "I thought he had everything handled. I answered honestly. So did I. Once. That was all. No sisterhood speech. No dramatic reconciliation between wronged women. Just the plain truth. And maybe that was better." The elevator opened. Evelyn and I stepped inside. Just before the doors closed, Daniel moved forward one last time. Not enough to stop them, just enough to send one final sentence into the gap. "You're enjoying this?" I held his gaze as the doors began to slide shut, and I gave him the only answer he had earned. "No, I'm surviving you." Then the doors closed. The ride down felt lighter than the ride up had that morning. Not joyful, just clean, like some poison had finally stopped circulating. In the car outside the courthouse, Evelyn made 3 calls before I could even take a full breath. 1 to lender counsel, 1 to emergency filings support, 1 to a property analyst who owed her a favour and could pull background on the bridge structure faster than normal channels. By the time we reached her office, the outline was already coming together. The loan was worse than a delay. Much worse. Daniel had used the house in a layered collateral arrangement tied to a development project that had stalled, overpromised, and then started bleeding. He had expected to refinance out of it before scrutiny tightened. When that failed, he shifted money, delayed disclosures, and tried to grab the house through divorce leverage before the full damage surfaced. Translation? He didn't just want the house because he was proud. He needed the house because he was cornered. That made his hallway whisper almost funny. "You're losing the house today." No, he was. He just didn't know it yet. Over the next 2 weeks, everything moved fast. Faster than he liked. The lender cooperated once they realised I was not the spouse hiding assets, but the one trying to preserve the property from the spouse who had endangered it. The court orders gave us room. Evelyn moved like a surgeon with a grudge. Martin Sloane, to his credit, stopped pretending Daniel's case was elegant and started negotiating like a man trying to reduce blood loss. Then came the final hearing. Not dramatic, not packed, no audience, no new wife at his arm, no whisper in the hallway. Just Daniel looking 10 years older, Martin looking exhausted, Evelyn looking precise, and me wearing a cream blouse and a calm I had paid for dearly. The lender issue had clarified enough by then to make one thing obvious. Daniel's superior position to maintain the house had been a fantasy. He could not support it cleanly. He had endangered it. He had misrepresented it. And in trying to weaponize it against me, he had damaged his own claim beyond repair. Judge Ruiz reviewed the final stipulations, the corrective disclosures, the debt allocations, the tracing of my inherited funds, the refinancing history, and the misconduct record already built across prior hearings. Then she ruled the house would remain with me, not forced sale, not shared leverage, not some insulting split shape to reward his fraud with convenience. Mine, subject to structured cleanup that protected the property from the debris he had attached to it, but mine. My heart didn't leap when she said it. That surprised me at first. I thought I would feel fireworks, triumph, vindication, something cinematic. Instead, I felt something quieter. Recognition! As if the law had finally caught up to the truth I had lived in for years. Judge Ruiz's final comments were dry, precise, and devastating. Petitioner did not merely occupy this residence emotionally, she said. She materially anchored it. Respondent, by contrast, sought to leverage and characterize the residence opportunistically while obscuring key financial realities. Equity does not reward that conduct. That sentence lives in my mind rent-free. Not because it praised me, because it named the difference perfectly. I anchored, he leveraged. That was our whole marriage in one legal paragraph. When it was over, Daniel didn't look at me right away. He looked at the table, then at the wall, then finally at Martin. As if some part of him still hoped another man could explain why reality had not arranged itself around his confidence. Brielle was not there. I found out later she had moved out of the condo 3 days after the second hearing and taken everything she bought with her, including the smug little coffee machine she once posted online with the caption, "New Chapter Energy." Good for her. Daniel approached me only once after the final order. In the parking lot. No audience, no swagger, no new wife, just him. Smaller somehow. Tired. He stopped a few feet away and said, "You always knew how to make me look like the villain." That line actually did make me smile. Because after everything, after all the documents and lies and liens and loans and warnings, he still thought image was the issue. I looked at him and said, "No, Daniel, you always knew how to become one." Then I got into my car and drove home. Home. That word sounded different then, heavier in a good way. Earned. When I opened the front door, the house felt the same and completely different. Same hallway table, same staircase, same afternoon light falling across the living room. Same tiny scratch on the kitchen floor from when we dragged the bar stools in too hard. But now the silence belonged to me. Not the silence of walking on eggshells. Not the silence after a lie. Not the silence of being managed. Mine. I stood in the entryway a long time. Then I did something small and perfect. I changed the locks. Not because Daniel still had a key he planned to use. Because rituals matter. Then I boxed up the last few legal leftovers, the copies, the notices, the settlement papers, the old account summaries. I put them in the hall closet, shut the door, and left them there like a finished season. That evening, I opened every curtain in the house. Every one. Let the late sun in, made tea, walked room to room barefoot. And for the first time in years, nothing in that house felt borrowed. A week later, I got one final message from Daniel. Just one. You won. I hope it was worth it. I read it once, then set the phone down, because that was the last lie. This had never been about winning. Winning would have been keeping my marriage, my trust, my peace, my home, and my dignity all intact. No, this was not winning. This was recovery with paperwork. This was survival with evidence. This was the slow, expensive privilege of forcing the truth to sit still long enough for a judge to see it. I never replied. I didn't need to. Because the best answer to a man who expected your collapse is often your continued life. 6 months later, the house looked different. Lighter paint in the dining room. The old guest room turned into a reading space. Daniel's home office became mine's sunny desk, clean shelves, 2 large plants, and not a single leather chair trying to look important. I kept the kitchen. Of course I did. That room had seen too much honesty from me to be redesigned for anybody else's taste. Sometimes people ask what revenge feels like. They think it must be fireworks. Public humiliation, a crushing line, a dramatic courtroom moment where the other person visibly shatters. And yes, parts of it can look like that. A whisper in a hallway that dies in a courtroom. A new wife standing up. A lawyer finally standing. A judge saying the house stays with her. But the most satisfying part, it wasn't any of those. It was the first quiet morning after it was over, standing in my kitchen, sunlight on the counter, kettle humming, no lies in the walls. No man in the driveway thinking confidence was a deed. Just me. Still there, still standing, still home. So if there's a lesson in all of this, it's not just that arrogant people fall. It's this. When someone walks into your life acting like they can rewrite your reality with confidence, let them talk. Let them whisper. Let them bring their audience. Let them smile too early. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay calm long enough to let the truth arrive properly. And when it does, you don't need to scream. You just need to watch the right person stand up